Hi, I'm Rue.
Hi, I'm Janel, and welcome to episode 11 of Cocktails and Compliance. And we are live from the SAHMA Leadership Conference in Knoxville.
Woohoo!
Yay! We are so excited to have two very special guests with us today. First, we have Glenda Leduc, who is president and CEO of Mansermar. We also have Mary Ross, who is president and CEO of Ross Business Development. I think we should be president and CEO of something too.
I think we should too.
I feel left out.
I know, me too. Also, I think it's awesome that this room is so full of people. This is probably our biggest live audience that we've ever had.
I know. I am so excited. And we also know that we are the last session that is blocking your path to the bar. So we brought the bar to you. So hopefully everyone saw that bar table in the back corner and has grabbed a drink because these are fantastic. We have very special cocktails today.
Our cocktail for the day is our HOTMA Hot Mess Spicy Margaritas. So everybody take a sip and cheers to y'all.
Cheers, everyone. We know HOTMA is such a hot mess. We needed something spicy. Mary wanted Fireball, and we decided we needed to be classier. So this is your blood orange jalapeno spicy margarita, and it is freaking delicious. So the other thing that Rue and I like to do, if you guys have not seen our podcast, especially if it's just Rue and I in the studio, we tend to have a little bit of a drinking game. So we don't want you guys to feel left out. We want you to have the full experience. So today's drinking game is to sip when you hear HOTMA. So we did save that that topic for last because we don't want anybody getting crazy in the next 30 minutes. We got about an hour and a half to go here today. But we promised to mention HOTMA early and often between now and then. Hey guys, it's Rue and Janel. We wanted to let you guys know that unfortunately we had some technical difficulties with our recording at the SAHMA Leadership Conference.
Actually, we did, and the hotel did.
I mean, to be honest, it wasn't Rue and I personally. But unfortunately, we had a snafu where we did not record the first 10 minutes or so. So I apologize. You missed some fantastic conversation about Inspire, about the demonstration program, some feedback from the audience about their experience with Inspire. What I will say is there was a conversation where one side of the room had one experience, the other side had another. Know that Inspire is coming soon. It is effective October 1st, 2023 for multifamily housing, housing choice vouchers, and project-based vouchers. We're still unclear on how it impacts tax credits, but go to the Inspire website on the HUD page. There's a lot of information there, lots of information about the scoring model, how this works. If you have questions, please reach out to Rue and I. Again, we apologize that that part of the recording is missing. With that, we will let you enjoy the rest of the conversation, starting with the Renter's Bill of Rights. All righty. So we're going to move on to our next topic. Who's heard of the Renter's Bill of Rights?
Ooh.
Thank you, Chris Cook, for raising your hand. And Larry, I'd be very disappointed if there was no participation.
Just because you raise your hand doesn't mean you have to talk when we ask a question. You can.
I promise I won't pick on all of you. I promise. All right. So the White House recently released a fact sheet highlighting actions to protect renters. Did y'all read the fact sheet? Same people raising their hands. Good job. All right.
I think the Tenant Bill of Rights is kind of interesting because we already have a resident rights and responsibilities. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. The new Tenant Bill of Rights is rights but not responsibilities. But if you read it, it reads very much like what we already do. It's almost like it's targeted to more market properties because it'll say things like, 30-day notices of eviction. Well, we're already at 30-day notices of eviction. All the stuff that we're currently doing tend to be part of those rights. But there are a few things where they, and I'm not as well versed on this as I could be. I guess you feel like you're doing everything you can for the tenants, and then they come back in and they say, yeah, but you need to do more.
And that's very, very accurate, I would say. I think that's what we feel is we really want the tenants to have rights. I mean, that's why we're in affordable housing. That's why we do what we do. We want to house people. And so it's not that a lot of the things that were in there, Mary said, we're already doing those things. And so the problem, I think, that exists is the publication that's out there, and what you hear is like, oh, well, you aren't doing your job. And so somewhat that flows over into our tenants' thinking sometimes, I think. And when it comes to screening, we are kind of in a very fine line because you want to house people. You want to give opportunities for people maybe that, made poor decisions or had things happen in their past. But on the other hand, you need to protect your existing residents.
Right.
So that's where it gets really difficult when you get into the tenant screening area, is to make sure that you're following all your fair housing, but you've really got to look at everything individually. And how do you look at everything individually and apply that where it's fair across the board to your existing tenants as well as to those potential applicants?
Right. And I think that there's a certain inclination for the media to make us look like villains.
Yep.
It's like, you have a fee for this and you're doing this other thing wrong. And you're sitting there going, well, there's a lot of industries that have a fee. I rent cars. Let me tell you what, there's about 16 million rental car fees that are associated with that, including all the insurance. How many of you have ever rented a car and they said, do you want collision? Do you want general liability? What are you doing? Are you under 24? And so fees are just the nature of the beast. Those of us, that are property management professionals, especially in low-income housing, we're trying to partner with the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the federal government. And it's kind of like, why are you charging rent? And it's like, well, we can't house anybody if we don't charge rent. So I think we kind of get a media interpretation that we're the bad guys, and we're not the bad guys. I think we'd like to spin that a little bit.
So I do have a comment, but before I say that, this is not about HOTMA.
No.
No.
Oh.
Not at all.
Oh, thanks,
Okay,
Larry.
Did I mention HOTMA? I'm sorry.
Goodness.
So in our world, we really are the poster child of what we are supposed to do with residents.
Right.
And so the Tenants' Bill of Rights really was geared towards a larger audience of not even big operators of conventional properties, but so that was the intent. However, it does affect what we do.
Right.
And so it is important, I believe, for all of us to understand where the White House was going with this and is going with this and is slanted towards this, and be able to stand up and say, hey, we are the good guys, because the landlords is never the good guy. But in this case, we are. And so we have tried to share our stories of what we are actually doing for this White House challenge. And hopefully it will be heard, but trying to lump professional apartment managers that specifically provide affordable housing is just not correct. It's not correct thinking.
And Larry, I think your key is one of the things that he said. Be sure to share your stories. There are a lot of bad stories that get shared out there, but the good stories a lot of times don't get shared. So be sure that you're sharing those with media as you have opportunity, with your congressmen, with your senators, with those people that can make a difference, because we really do have great stories to share.
Well, and I know that's one of the things we talked about at NAMA, the Communities Equality program, right? Those are good stories to share. And if you share those with your representatives, you share that with the media. But those are great stories to share. All right. You want your own mic, Larry?
Oh my gosh,
HOTMA.
Larry.
Hey, did you say he could say
I wish
that?
I'd thought of that.
We've created a monster back there.
What I just heard was Larry's going to volunteer to be on a podcast. Okay. Got it.
Don't be scared to ask questions.
And if you haven't read it, go get it.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I was going to say. It's out there for you to find, and don't be afraid to talk to your congressperson about it, because we are doing it with all of the associations, and so it's kind of en masse, but I also think it's important to do it on an individual level as well.
It makes a huge difference to do it on an individual level. If we're representing an organization, and sure, that brings the mass, but where you share your story in your location, it makes a big difference. They listen a whole lot more.
Moving on. Let's talk about RAD.
Rad. Okay. Which side of rad do you want to talk about? One or two?
I want to talk about whatever side you want to talk about. We were talking in our prep call, we were talking about the public housing to PBRA, that's almost done. But then we started talking about the 811 pracs.
Okay, well, let's do the 811 and the pracs, the rad to those, because those are where my space is a little bit more than the public housing. There are lots of things that are going on with that, lots of good things, because these are getting older with the ability to do the rad 2 program now. And while it's difficult at best, we'll acknowledge that it's hard to get those rents up, and you don't get an increase over what they are at the current time. And without debt, how do you service that debt that you're going to need? How do you get investors that are willing to come in and underwrite that? So you got to combine a lot of programs there a lot of times to make the financing work, is just the reality of it. But good news, HUD just came out with a notice. The notice had come out, but it got published in the Federal Register, and it is on the HUD website. You can now go on, you can get potentially a bump that the RAD resource will approve, not your local office, up to $250, depending on where. Yes, up to $250.
Wow.
It depends on what your costs are for construction, how much rehab you're doing, and those things. But that's a huge blessing. It really is. And I have to applaud HUD for seeing that it needed to happen. Go ahead,
$250
Mary.
per unit.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Left out a key factor there. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Yeah, $250 per unit.
I want to keep the excitement up there.
But that is why it is such a great thing. Go on if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that. HUD has they recorded, I think, the listening session that they did, and they've got a Q&A, as well as the funds that are out there, and they're first come, first serve is what I understand. So that's the sad thing. And so I know there's a lot of people that were poised that had deals that may be in process that weren't working. And so they wanted to try to do those. But I do think HUD's being forethoughtful and looking ahead to see what they can do to make these deals work, because they need renovations, and it's very difficult to do that.
Well, and the other thing too is, for those of you that are familiar with the PRAC program, the rent setting for the PRAC program was really low. I mean, the rents were low. And so what happened, one of the rules for PRAC is that if you have an applicant and they're low income, but they're not getting any subsidy, you could still move them in. Well, with RAD, that was not the rule. They have to have $1 worth of subsidy at least to move into the individual units. So you kind of got to the situation where you were having a population decline with new residents. And we all know the nature of a 202. We're going to have residents that are going to turn in these units. And so we need new applicants to be able to be placed. And I think the only way to do that was to increase the overall rent for the unit. So HUD's learning, as they go along with that one. And then they just approved the 811.
They did.
PH is almost done.
Yes.
So that's out. All the rents up in RAP have been converted. So that's done.
That's done. I think your real opportunity right now is your pracs and your 811s. I mean, that's where there's a real opportunity and focus, and there's a lot of funding that still exists there. And so I think one of the things, while the rent increase helps, I think that we as operators and owners have to figure out how we can get the financing put together, to make these deals happen, because, there's just a lot of opportunity for the pracs that existed. The hard thing, which we haven't figured out, I'd love input on this, is a lot of those prac deals were smaller properties. And so it's harder to, when you're looking at things, to get, if you're looking at tax credits, obviously the larger number of units that you have, the easier it is to make those work. If you've got, 20 unit, 30 unit, 40 unit properties that are RAD deals, what do you do with those? And so I think there's a lot more that needs to be explored. I'm hopeful that HUD will come up while you can move some things around. And, it's just really impossible, to be honest. Even with the increased rents, I think it's going to be difficult to make those properties work. So keep talking to your congressman, keep talking to your senators, keep talking to your HUD reps to see if we can't come up with some programs that can work on some of those properties that, may need it even more than your larger properties.
I would say that if you're a prac and you're hesitating to go to RAD, number one, it's a great preservation program as far as I'm concerned. But I've talked to some prac owner agents that have said, well, we've heard horror stories about the RAD deals, and I will give you that the public housing to PBRA RAD has been a little painful. I'm looking at clients of mine that have been doing that. And there's a lot when you move from one whole set of rules to another set of rules with the same residents. So it's kind of hard to do. But with Radford Prac, it's all multifamily housing. So it's a lot easier. Your property managers are already used to the rules. Everybody pretty much knows what's going on. So it's a much smoother transition.
Absolutely. I think it's much easier. It's a totally different animal than the RAD 1. Not as much training is required. There's some, it's really getting past the financing part, I think, is the most difficult thing.
Absolutely.
When you get into your operations, if anything, it's almost easier, I think.
Yeah, I definitely would agree.
So when we talked about RAD, one of the things that Rue and I love to talk about on all of our podcasts.
Are we talking about 203A?
We are talking about 203A.
Woo!
So that's kind of been the running joke on our podcast. If you haven't listened to it, is when is 203A going to happen? So I mean, we still are all saying, when is 203A going to happen? As you can see, there's a lot that's going into 203A, and I think the bulk of it, Mary, if I remember correctly, has to do with RAD, right?
Definitely RAD and HOTMA. Yeah, there is a lot of RAD update. We would have much rather have seen the 203 update go out in 2018 and 2019, which would have made the RAD conversion significantly easier. But a lot of the RAD changes are component 1, public housing to PBRA RAD, and these are continuing initiatives. So they have rules very much like PRAC in the fact that a resident, depending on their income, can pay more than gross rent. So it can go up, and then we get tax credit involved in it. So it's like, which one is more, which one is lower. And now we're dealing with fair market rent as another cap. So we've got a few changes that have come into play. And so what we were trying to do was automate all these special processes for component 1, which we still need to do. And we've done a lot of work in that area. Once again, if we could have released for RAD, that would have been good. I would rather be.
It
on
wasn't for
203B.
lack of trying, by the way.
It was not for lack of trying. But yeah, RAD is. If you are a component 1 PH to PBRA RAD, the conversion to 203A will make your life significantly easier.
Well, and we've already started on the 203B spec. We started that a long time ago. Okay, look, she said she's going to retire again before that happens. So we'll see.
I like how you said again.
Okay. Well, and this is this is the interesting thing about 203B and why that's come out. Some of you, depending on what you're doing with your associations and things, may have heard some of the higher ups at HUD talk about how they want to automate the waiting list and they want to come up with a national waiting list.
That was a fun call. I was on that.
That was a fun call.
By the way, that just got it because this didn't get picked up on the mic. That got the biggest groan in the whole room so far, by the way. Everybody was like, great.
It's under development.
It's under research.
I give it 20 years. We'll see.
Yeah. And I would give it 20 years too. There has been.
I was being sarcastic, but you actually said
I
it way
really
more
said
serious.
It would be 20 years.
Okay.
I mean, you talk to the people at HUD that are working on these initiatives from both sides of the house, and it's very interesting because they say, well, we're going to add somebody to a waiting list. And I said, well, what if, their position on the national waiting list doesn't match the tenant selection plan at the site? And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's something we need to back up and think about. So as you go through the research for that particular piece, they're backing up a little bit every time they think they have this new move forward initiative. What ends up happening is you say, these are the rules, these are the rules, these are the rules. So I think it's a 203B 5 or more year focus. Did I just say that on the air?
203B at 5 years is not really a stretch. I mean, how long did we work on 203A?
We're still working on 203.
I was thinking
That's what I
that's
mean.
actually kind of reasonable, and I can't believe that we're saying that's reasonable because we used to get these done in a couple of years.
Every 2 years,
years,
or
yeah.
18 months.
Yeah.
Well, part of the problem is because the regulations have changed even along the way. I mean, in a sense, as you've been developing it.
Oh yeah, I mean the regulations change, on a daily basis with the 203A, and that's always a challenge, but something that we've dealt with a little more efficiently, in previous versions. I think that I think you have to look at all the local laws and everything else when you start talking about having a central waiting list, which is going to be the primary focus for 203B.
Yeah. So I know Hillary covered a lot of material in that last session, but just
What about those that weren't in it? Do we want to?
I was going to say, so Mary, do you want to hit some of the highlights of what's in 203A that doesn't involve HOTMA?
I think the biggest thing or the coolest thing, the thing I like, is the repayment agreement stuff. And my thing with residents has always been, I'll love you and I'll help you as long as you tell me the truth about what's going on. But once you start lying to me, I'm not feeling the love that much anymore. And so I think they should have to pay their repayment agreements. So one of the things that happened, there's this, how many of you agree with me on that one? Okay.
Oh, lots of hands went up. Okay. Lots of hands.
Okay. So here's the deal. How many of you know what the Office of the Inspector General is? Okay, so they're like the police for the federal agencies, and then there's a HUD, Office of the Inspector General. And one of the things that this group said when they were doing a HUD audit was, how come we have people that originally had a repayment agreement? The repayment agreement hasn't been paid off, but we're still providing subsidy. I think that's a valid question. Absolutely. So what they did was they revamped the whole repayment agreement process. And they said, what we want to do is we want to say, okay, these are the people that are active. They're good. They haven't missed a payment, or maybe they've only missed one payment. And we're feeling good about these particular people in repayment. And then we have our zero income people that are in repayment. So we're just suspending, because 10% of zero is zero. So these people are good. But if you go inactive, which is 3 missed payments consecutively, still shows up on the voucher. So what that means is that even though no payment was posted, your CA, HUD, everybody is going to be able to track these people that are still receiving subsidy that didn't tell the truth. As we say, did not fully and accurately disclose income information. We don't call it fraud. We
You
call
said
it
the F word.
misrepresentation. I know. So I really like that they're putting a lot of onus on tracking that information. I would love it if we were like PIH and we didn't provide subsidy to somebody that still owed. So we're hoping that's kind of the next step in the process. But, that's the next, as far as RAD, HOTMA, and then the repayment agreements. I like that. Is anybody participating in FSS? I'm going to ask another question, because there's been 3 classes where we've asked that. Is there anybody in the room that knows what FSS is? Okay, so good. So we got some people that know what it is and just start participating. This is a self-sufficiency program, so you may want to look into it a little bit. We're also automating the FSS reporting process. So that's the other big deal that I think with 203A. That's a big improvement.
It is a big improvement. The repayment agreement, I will say from a software perspective, is a big change to code as well. And we get new forms with 203A, because who doesn't like new forms? Right. So
how long is that going to take?
Hmm?
How long is that going to take?
Are we looking at me?
I did look at you, but you don't have to answer.
She doesn't do the forms. That was just simply
she doesn't
a rhetorical
do the forms.
question.
It was more of a, hey, I think there's
anything.
Oh, well, you mean the new voucher? Oh, we've already done the new voucher.
But has it gone through clearance?
Oh, it's in clearance now. They're not going to mess with it. This is one of the things that we've learned about clearance and things. The voucher is a very easy document to get through clearance. It's not really that complicated. It's like, here they are. We want to give them this much money, and here's the other information that we're tracking. So special claims for payment agreements. So I don't expect any pushback on the new voucher forms.
Good.
I mean, I'm feeling the love for those. So.
Good. I mean, we coded them, so I hope it's.
We're expecting them to be approved by the end of September.
Yeah,
I know. So,
yeah. So we're hoping we're good. All right.
So do we want to do any type of a projection on a date on when we think 203A is going to go live?
Glenda, I was going to ask that.
I have no idea.
Me either, because I lost this bell a long time ago. So.
You want me to make an educated guess?
Yes.
Okay. I'll tell you that if it were me and I had to make an educated guess and I was a betting girl, I would say that Tracks 203A will be live and running for HUD only, probably by the end of the year.
And by that, you mean just they will have updated the track system?
They will have updated the track system so that they can say as an organization that they have complied with the requirement to have HOTMA implemented by 1/1/2024. That's my opinion. That is not anything I know. I have no inside knowledge or inside track. I would
She
say
said HOTMA.
HOTMA. Oh, sorry. I would say if we can get some agreement on the regulatory requirements that did not change, we could probably have a specification document done end of September, end of October. Put that plus 4 months for development, plus 4 months for implementation. So I would say by mid next year, everybody should be installed with 203A software. Mid to third quarter next year, everybody should be installed with 203A. That is optimistic and really reliant on a certain level of agreement with everybody, the industry, the software vendors, the contract administrators, the Department of Housing. You know, there just has to be agreement on how all this stuff works together. But doable is more aggressive. Could we do it faster? Yes, we could. With what we're seeing now with some of the roadblocks that we're running into, I'm saying safe guess is second to third quarter implementation for 203A through the industry. But I have, once again, no inside knowledge. That's just an educated guess. Now, I will also tell you that back in 2018, I said something very similar to that and did not expect a roadblock at the department for releasing 203A. But at this particular point in the game, I think that there is a press for the 1/1/2024 deadline. So,
Yeah.
Well, and don't you think there's a press to get it beyond that because of all the regulations that HOTMA has got coming into play?
I think with the changes, I think they're going to run the same thing that PIH ran, in the fact that all the certifications have to be compliant by at least 1/1/2025, and that's probably going to be acceptable to Congress. Boy, look at the dead silence in the room for that one. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Good thing?
Good thing.
Good. We're going to have to find some new thing to bet on. It got to after, 2018, then Rue and I were like, what's going to come out before 203A? That was the running joke. Like, how many other things would come to fruition first?
Well, the nice thing to know is, like, you've got to remember that the whole thing, this is not HUD, this is Congress.
Right.
So the whole thing starts with a bill, and there's only, a couple bills that don't have anything to do with the track software or the subsidy calculation that are out there. So we're not really worried if they get passed and then they go through the whole final rule notification. It's still not going to affect tracks. So at this particular point in the game, we're already writing for 811 RAD for PRAC. So that's already being written in. We already know certain things like the passbook rate is going to change. So that's all being written in. All the new RAD stuff is being written in. So we just have a couple things that we need to I'm so glad I switched to water. We're going to have a couple of things that we need to tweak for HOTMA, and that just takes final decision making. But some of it relies on software, and some of it is just rule making. So I'm ready to go. I think we should. I'm ready.
I know. Mary's been ready because she came out of retirement, sort of, for this.
You think she'd like to go back into retirement?
I think she would like to go back into retirement, but I know.
How many of these guys you think want to go into retirement now?
Oh, hands went up.
Okay.
All right. No, I know she would like to go back in, but I will say you guys have no idea how much she's invested in this. And I will say, I don't want to say arguing because that's not really the right word, but more advocating on your behalf of, hey, this is all well and good, but let's think about how this is going to play out operationally. How is this going to work? Which has spawned a whole lot of fun conversations and changes. So every time you see something change, it's probably because Mary was like, well, but did you think about this? And they're like, oh, wait, no. So let's work on that. So we do appreciate that.
That's a working group thing, though.
It is a working group thing, but you've spearheaded that. So thank you for that. Oh, go ahead.
I don't have a question. I have a comment. So often we sit here as industry people and people who are in the industry and not realize the people who play a part in the background. So I just want to say I agree with you, and you guys don't know how much Mary has sacrificed to come out of retirement. We'd probably still be struggling the road, even though she has a working group. She leads the working group, and I think we owe her a great round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys. It's a labor of love. It definitely is a labor of love. And you guys have been so good to me through the years. So I am happy to come back and try to make this as easy of a transition as humanly possible.
What a wonderful swan song if you can say you got 203 and HOTMA done and then you could actually retire.
That would be
amazing.
The dream.
That would be amazing. All right, the elephant in the room, the implementation time frame for HOTMA. And we know Public and Indian Housing has released a memo that they're going to delay compliance, and we're all kind of waiting to see what does this mean for the other side of the house at HUD for multifamily housing. And I know talking with people who also have tax credits, they're like, well, what are we going to do about this as well? And so I'm talking with a lot of our tax credit friends. They're all just waiting on guidance from their states, which shocking to say that about tax credits. Mary, let's talk about what we've heard about some multifamily housing guidance on the implementation timeframe.
We've heard nothing from multifamily housing on the implementation timeframe. What they have said is that they have a pending notice that's going through clearance, and they'll be announcing that timeframe. We're hoping that they follow Public and Indian Housing. So basically, it's not that Public and Indian Housing is going to start January 1st, 2025. It's that the implementation would have to be completed by January 1st, 2025. So how many of you were in my HOTMA session? Did anybody get the timeline book? I said, this is what you can do now, and this is what you can do later, depending on when we get these forms. So in this particular situation, there are back tasks that need to be completed. And, they have to go through the process. There's just nothing you can get around. We need a new lease. We need a new 987. We need a new fact sheet. We need new addendums. And, HUD has to have a notice and have rulemaking. And so there's a lot to be done. I think it was a really aggressive deadline to say 1/1/2024. What we would like HUD to do and what we've asked is to separate the notice from the announcement about an implementation deadline. We just feel like we should have the same shake that Public and Indian Housing has, where they've been given a little bit of relief. We would like to formally get that relief specifically by the beginning of September, because the beginning of September is 2024 ARs. And I am really looking for something to say, this is what you have to do for the 2024 ARs, or what you're allowed to do for the 2024 ARs. My thing, though, too, is I would love to see what tax credits and RD are doing.
Wouldn't we all love to see that?
So,
And just, it is really state by state, that we're waiting to hear. And I think they're like we are. They're waiting to hear from HUD because they aren't willing to make their decision. I think you were mentioning California, and I was on a call with them, and that's exactly what they said is we're waiting. They went to the conference in June, I think the state conference of the state agencies, and, they were like hoping that something would come out shortly after that. It hasn't. I haven't heard too much. TJ, take the microphone to Stacy. Stacy, do you want to comment anymore?
no pressure there, Stacy.
No pressure here. As far as any state agencies that you've heard and how they're waiting to hear or how they're moving forward?
So we've actually heard from 3 state agencies this week, and they've said they're moving forward, which I think is really interesting.
Wait, define
Very
moving
interesting.
forward, like 1/1/24?
Saying we are going to have something out in the next few weeks.
But they don't have anything published yet.
Right. And that's what I think is interesting to hear
Yes.
them say, yeah, you need to do this, but we're really not going to tell you what you need to do. So I think it's sort of that, hey, you've got to do it. We're not responsible for telling you what to do.
And I think that they're anticipating that we're going to get something from HUD. Would you mind telling what 3 states that you've heard that from?
I cannot say that right now because that
Okay.
was one of the things we said is, can we tell?
And they
people
said
this?
no.
And they said no. So
Okay.
that tells me that they're not entirely comfortable with
With
their
their
statements
statement.
as they are. They did say they're working on their forms. They said they're working on the ticks. So I guess it's at least good that we know there is progress, but we know the 120 days is just around the corner.
Around
So,
the corner.
I think it'll be interesting, and to also see what they're going to adopt, right? What are they going to do? Are they going to say we're sticking with $5,000, as a rule, we're moving to the 50,000. So I think on the tax credit side, it's not unusual that we will probably be further divided in what we're doing.
Is there any opportunity, like the tax working group? Do they have a tax credit working group that communicates with the Treasury?
Well, I think NCSHA is the group that would do that. So we'll see where they're going. I mean, at the conference, there really was very little direction that was given. Certainly when I attended, I was hoping there was going to be a lot more information, and it was just, they knew nothing.
I think they were hoping that HUD was going to put out more. And since the conference was earlier, that they thought there was going to be more clarity. And so with the delay, I think that they just kind of have delayed. And so it's like, what do we do now? Can we delay any longer?
What about USDA? Is anybody working with USDA 515 contracts?
Lisa,
You're a software vendor.
I was going to say, I was going to raise my hand too, but it didn't. I can tell you, I mean, we were at the car meeting in June and we didn't hear anything. All right. So if we don't hear anything from HUD, because the last I heard was we may hear something in fourth quarter, which means October, not September. So business as usual with your.
What time is it?
Oh, do you need to check your email? Do you maybe have a note? We'll all pause to see if you have
I was
something.
just wondering if we were out of time. So I didn't answer that question.
Now a break from our sponsors.
I know.
so I saw that Trax is down today, so I wanted to see if Mary wanted to revise her deadline on when it's going to be working again.
Actually, Trax
when
was
it's
down.
good.
Trax was down yesterday, and
But
the
they
email
just
came
told
out
us
today.
today.
So if you looked at the date, it said it was down yesterday.
Which makes us feel really warm and fuzzy.
Really, right? If you're building those unanticipated delays into your bet, because we're all like taking pieces of this bet here.
Right. They that was a very minor glitch, and they fixed it very rapidly. So by the time they actually wrote the email, the Trax was back up. So
Did the email have to go through clearance too? Because it took them a hot minute. I'm just saying that normally, okay. You know I'm right.
But it was funny.
Okay.
It's all fine. We have glitches every once in a while. But as owner agents, just as a word of advice that you brought it up, Chris, make sure that if you did submit early yesterday morning that you check to make sure that your transmission was recorded correctly. For those of you that don't have a contract administrator who will do that for you. So what was the original question?
We
that I
were
was trying
saying
to
if we
avoid?
don't hear anything until October and people start their ARs in September, I mean, clearly we're not on 203A.
Right.
We've been told we're going down this path until we hear otherwise.
We are.
So do
So-
people do anything different?
You know some of the regulations that
You
you
know
could
some.
implement.
You could.
Yeah, we have a document for the people that were in the HOTMA class. We have a document that's posted on our website. It's a free document. We're giving it to SAHMA so that they can post it on their website. It literally says, in Mary Ross's opinion, this is what you can do now. So income inclusions and exclusions have changed. They're in the Code of Federal Regulations. There's no argument over what's included or excluded in income. So, move on. Use the new income inclusions and exclusions. Things like VA aid and attendance. How many of you have veterans living on your properties? Anybody with veterans? Okay, VA aid and attendance is no longer included as income. Period. End of story. It's over. I know. I'm with you because I'm a military supporter. So there are things like that. So if you have veterans that are receiving aid and attendance, take it off. What we did in our income inclusions and exclusions that we posted on our website is we said which ones were new and which ones were still this, like we know about these. Here's the ones that either were revised, like Lisa had one, like workers' compensation, income or not. What do you think? Workers' comp. Say yes or no. No. Welcome to it. So there have some things that have been modified. That we always counted workers' comp, and now they're considering it an insurance settlement. So you're in a different space. So it's really good to take a look at it, which is why we marked them and said this has been revised, and these are brand new, and these are things we knew about. Assets, same thing. You can change the asset calculation. Your disqualifiers for anybody that has $100,000 or real property suitable for occupancy, you can bring that in. Your TSPs can be updated. I mean, your hardship policies can be developed. I mean, there's a lot you can do now. but you cannot calculate the assistance payment the way that they want you to.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are a lot of things that aren't related to software, right? Because I know software, we're certainly waiting to get a green light.
And the general feeling is, I think a lot of people, I'd love a show of the hands, that have kind of waited because they're waiting on software to implement.
We did that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's normal. I think maybe some people are afraid to raise their hands, but I mean, I think that's normal. But the question becomes, and the decisions that we really have to make as owners and agents, is not only are we going to implement those things that we can, which I agree with Mary, I think we've got to start looking at those, particularly when you look at the horizon of when we're really going to be able to fully implement it. And so when you look at that, then you've got to look and say, what am I going to do between now and then? How do I get my staff trained? You know, it's one thing if I have a property and it's just a few individuals at that property. If you've got a number of properties with a lot of individuals, can you get them trained in time to do those January? Do you delay doing those January, where you might jump on them now in order to get people trained? I think those are the real things that we have to be talking about.
Well, and then always circling back to the residents, because, you know, it's like the property managers and the residents, you know, that's what I look at. And the other thing that I think is really, really important, rather than training the property managers or updating the software or getting answers, is making sure that these residents that are going to be affected by these changes are gently brought into the new rules. You know, you just can't tell somebody, hey, you know, these are the new rules and your rent's going to go up and the whole 9 yards. There is an approach, a soft approach, to try to make it as palatable as possible. And, you know, we like to work with a lot of property management firms that are our clients and say central source. We talked about that. What do you think about having a central person that's answering questions for residents?
I think that's a great idea. I think for those, because those site managers that are on site, they have the relationships. It's hard for them. I mean, they want to tell them, but it's hard for them. So you need to explain those rules. You need to make sure you're applying them consistently. You need to make sure that there's understanding and compassion. But at the same time, these are the rules. We have to comply with them. I think back even to just over the last couple of years, we have a lot of senior properties, and, you know, there was a large increase in your Social Security and your COLA and with some of those things. And just the increase that alone had on them. Sure, they were getting additional income, but it sure didn't make that feel any better to them. I mean, even I had a lot of conversations because they'd gone to the right people and they'd had the conversation, but they just needed to be heard. And so I think it's a great idea to have someone that's not only making sure that they're explaining that they're telling the same story, that they're not getting told different stories across your portfolio, and that it's someone that when they offer that, understand, but have that care and compassion with delivering it as well.
And I tell you one thing to think about, especially when you're talking about your teams, and this is for contract administrators as well, because you're going to get these calls from these residents. And one thing I did, this is with National Church Residences at one time, and we did something called a virtual dementia class. Has anybody ever done that, where you do virtual dementia? It's a very cool thing, especially if you're a senior property manager. And what they do is they put you in this situation where you're basically asked these questions before you go in, and they're like, are you comfortable, or what's going on? And then you walk in the room and they give you 3 tasks. Okay. I know you're nodding your head. There's a bunch of task tables, but they'll say things like, we need you to sort the socks, set the table, and fill the glasses with water. Let's say that's your 3 tasks. Okay. People talk about me and my memory. I forgot what 2 of the tasks were. Once they put you in that room that was uncomfortable and the lights were down and, you know, people were doing things, you know, I just said, I forget, and I stopped. So that's one of your residents. We had somebody that moved all the furniture around and did everything, you know, because this was all videotaped. So they're somebody that's going to take control of the room. Somebody cried. Somebody got mad. You know, these were all the different scenarios. Those are how your residents are going to react. Absolutely. And you have to make sure that if you're dealing with these residents, if you're addressing their concerns, that you understand that sweet grandma that you love more than life itself may actually become very aggressive and angry that this is affecting her rent. And I think it has a lot to do not with training on HOTMA or training on 203A or explaining what the increases are, but also training your staff that people may react in a really weird way, and that you need to have the tools to address that as we're going down that path. Because at the end of the day, it's the residents that we're serving, not HUD, not the owners, not anybody else. It's the residents that we're serving.
Absolutely. I mean, that's critical, I think.
All right. We are right at time. Anybody have one last question or parting thought? HOTMA. Chris says HOTMA. All right. Bottoms up if you haven't finished. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Feel free to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. Like I said, Rue and I do this podcast frequently. You can find it on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we appreciate you being here and hanging out with us to the very end of the day. Thanks.
Thank y'all.